Welcome to this week's Torah lesson. This week's Torah portion is Parsha's Acharei Kedoshim. The question of the week is, how do we find comfort in these trying times? So in this week's Torah portion, Parsha's Acharei Kedoshim, 29 years ago, the last Sicha of the Rebbe on these two Torah portions, the Rebbe spoke in Farbrengen, and he asked a simple question. The Torah begins and says, This is how Aaron would enter into the Holy of Holies. And the Torah is very specific. He had to enter impure, he had to enter with all these appropriate garments. And the Rebbe asked a simple question. The main avodah is to do the service, to bring the sacrifices, the prayers. Why is it so important, the garments? Up to the point, if he did the service without the proper garments, the whole service would be disqualified. We also know, in a side note, which is important, that the high priest had to be very wealthy. And if he wasn't, people had to make him wealthy. And the Rebbe asked, why is that so important? So the Rebbe explains, based on the Mishnah, which we're actually learning this week, Pirkei Avot, chapter 3. So the Mishnah says, Histakel b'shleisha dvarim, look into three things, ve'eina taba lidei aveira, and you're not going to come to do a sin. So the Rebbe asks the question, we know how to count. It lists afterwards three things. So why does the Mishnah say Histakel b'shleisha dvarim? So the Rebbe therefore says, when the Mishnah says Histakel b'shleisha dvarim, it's not necessarily talking about the three things that it lists later. But the Mishnah is telling us that if you want to avoid, God forbid, sinning, there has to be Histakel b'shleisha dvarim. You have to always look at three things. What three things? And the Rebbe explains very simple. We love a relationship with God. Us and God, life is good. We're taken care of, God is great, and life is wonderful. Dealing with the world, who wants to deal with the world? The challenges, the struggles, the arguments, the issues. Life is good, you and God. But nevertheless, the Mishnah says, no. Hashem put you in the world. Why? Because He wants you to make a dir b'tachtonim. Hashem wants us to make a dwelling place down here. In order to make a dwelling place in the physical world, you need you need God, but then you need a world. You have to deal with the world. And when a person is histakel b'shleisha dvarim, when a person works with himself, Hashem, and the world, then you'll never come to sin. And based on that, the Rebbe explains, that's why the Torah portion tells us, Bezois Yavoi. The whole idea of the priest wasn't that he should have a spiritual experience, but the idea was that he has to have, yes, he goes into the Holy and the Holy of Holies. But even there, how does he go in? It's a physical space. He has to elevate the physical space. He goes in a soul within a body. He has to elevate the body. He has to be wearing the proper garments. And as we know, the garments have to be two important ingredients, L'chavoid u'lisifares. They have to be honorable, they have to be beautiful. Why? Because the goal is to elevate the materialistic world. He had to be wealthy because you have to elevate the materialistic world. And the Rebbe says that specifically about the koyin and about the Histakel b'shleisha dvarim. But now the Rebbe takes the same idea and he looks at it at the world in general. And he says, in general, the world we're living in, it's a dark world. We're in gullus, we're in exile. What do we want? We want geula. We want redemption. We want to be free. But the Rebbe takes, let's look at the whole idea of exile and redemption. The Rebbe says like this. Exile in Hebrew is goyla. Goyla is galus, exile. Geula is redemption. So the Rebbe says, 1 minute. You have the same word, goyla, which is exile, which when you think of exile, when you think of challenges, who wants it? Then when you say geula, redemption, it's the same words as goyla. The only difference is between goyla and geula, you're adding an aleph. So the Rebbe says, why isn't it a whole new word for redemption? Why are you taking the same word of goyla, adding in just one letter and making it gula, making it redemption? And the Rebbe explains, because redemption is not about forgetting about the past, not about running away from challenges, not about running away from the world. Real gula means being free. Meaning to say is you're in the same situation, the same people, the same issues. However, you have a gula approach. Meaning to say is you're dealing with the same life. And as the Rebbe brings from the Rambam says the first phase of Mashiach coming, the first phase in Yemoysa Mashiach, the Rambam says clearly, Oilam kamin haginoeg. It's going to be the same world. No new major miracles, resurrection of the dead. That's the second phase. The first phase of Mashiach coming is Olam kimin haginoig. The world is going to be regular. It's going to operate just the way it's operating now. The difference is that before Yemoisa Mashiach, we don't see Hashem. We only see darkness. We only see challenges. But when Mashiach comes in the first phase, we're going to see Hashem in everything. And that's why specifically Geula is the same words as Goyla, as exile, just with an aleph. Because the difference between exile and redemption is only one difference. The difference is Hashem is going to be revealed in everything that exists in this world. And the Rebbe finishes off with a very, very powerful and moving story. The Rebbe brings from the prophets, kings, and also it's also brought down in the book Chronicles, Divrei Hayamim. There's a famous tragic story where the Tanya, who was the mother of Chasidic, who was put to death, he was killed. So she decided she was going to wipe out the whole royal family. And she was on a go. She started to wipe out the whole royal family. There was a woman, Yehosheva, that realized, oh my gosh, if the whole royal family is being wiped out, how's there going to be a king from the royal family? So she went ahead and she hid Ataliah's grandson. His name was Yoash. And she hid him in the temple. Not only did she hide him in the temple, she went into the Holy of Holies. She had access because her husband was the high priest. So she was able to hide this baby in the temple for 6 years. Think about that quarantine. 6-year quarantine. She hid Yoash together with someone to take care of him for 6 years in the Holy of Holies. And Rebbe says, obviously, they fed him, they made sure he had what to eat, they made sure he was able to sleep. He had everything he needed. He was totally taken care of. But for 6 years, he was in quarantine in the temple, not only in the temple, in the Holy of Holies, so that he would survive. And sure enough, afterwards, in the 7th year, when the high priest saw it was the right time, they took him out, and he actually became the king over the Jewish people. And that's the famous line in the prophets, where they scream out, Yechi HaMelech, live the king, who was this, Yoash, who became the king over the Jewish people. But the Rebbe says, even though it's a very, very bitter story, because here she's wiping out the royal family, but what you see is that in the darkest times, when the royal family is being wiped out, the one that's being saved, where is he being saved? In the Holy of Holies. And the Rebbe says, what do you learn from here? That the Jews' place is where? Where's a Jewish person's place? In the Holy of Holies. Now, when Mashiach comes, it's going to be revealed. In Gullus, the only way we know that our place is in the Holy of Holies is unfortunately through a tragedy, when they want to wipe out the royal family. Then we see where our real place is. Just like Goyla is going to bring about the Geula. Without Goyla, you can't have Geula. And our job is to put the Aleph into the Goyla. That will give us the real Geula. So to answer the question, where do we find comfort in these trying times? As tough as it is, the Rebbe says clearly, yes, it's Goyla. But from the Goyla, from these challenges, we're going to have the greatest Gula. By bringing Aleph, Hashem, into our lives, amongst the challenges, we'll merit to the greatest possible redemption that we're all looking forward to. May it happen speedily in our days. Thanks so much for joining us for our weekly Torah lesson. This week's Torah lesson is dedicated to the memory of Baruch ben Aryeh Leib, Shlomo ben Yosef, and Rachel bas Lipa. May their souls be elevated by the Torah we're studying in their memory. Thanks again for joining us for our weekly Torah lesson. For more information, please see our website, ChabadSWF.org. And may all the people that need healing in honor of us learning Torah should be healed, and we should all merit to the greatest healing of all of us, and we'll merit to see Mashiach speedily in our days. Amen.